Waiter insults Jackie Chan in a luxury restaurant, not knowing he owns the place. Imagine sitting down for a quiet dinner, wanting nothing more than a peaceful night to yourself. But then, a waiter walks up to your table and, without realizing it, insults you in the harshest, most disrespectful way possible. Not only does he call you names, but he judges you based on your background, your race, and your very existence. Now picture this. You're Jackie Chan, and the waiter has no idea who you are or the lifetime of struggles you've fought through just to be seen as equal. This is not just a story of an arrogant waiter and a celebrity. This is a story of racism, of assumptions, of the pain of being dismissed because of who you are. And in this moment, Jackie Chan, the man who has spent his life breaking barriers and fighting for respect, will show the world what it truly means to stand up for yourself, for others, and for the values that should unite us all. Stick with me, because you're about to witness something that will shock you to the core. The evening at Jackie Chan's restaurant was meant to be just another quiet night. Jackie was no stranger to crowds, no stranger to being seen. But tonight, he sought refuge from the flashing cameras, from the constant swirl of attention. He wanted to enjoy a rare moment of peace, unnoticed, blending in as just another customer, a man who wanted to eat a good meal in his own establishment, without the glare of the world around him. He walked into the restaurant as if no one knew who he was. The place, renowned for its elegance and exquisite cuisine, hummed with the low murmur of soft conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the gentle music that played in the background. The dimmed lights created an intimate setting, where everyone felt like they were the most important person in the room. The air was filled with the delicate aroma of fresh ingredients, expertly prepared by the chefs Jackie had carefully handpicked over the years. It was his pride and joy. His restaurant was an extension of him, his love for food, and the dedication he had put into this space. Jackie was seated at a corner booth, far from the other guests, tucked away just enough to avoid the bustling noise, but still within reach of the exquisite dishes that were constantly being brought to tables around the restaurant. He sank into the plush velvet chair, his mind momentarily free from the weight of expectations that always seemed to follow him wherever he went. No one paid him any mind, just another face in the crowd, which was exactly what he wanted. It was rare to have a night like this, a night when no one recognized him, a night when he wasn't the star of the show, when he wasn't the subject of everyone's gaze. A young waiter, a fresh face to the restaurant, approached Jackie's table. He was eager, perhaps a little too eager, to make a good impression on his first night. He had no idea who Jackie was, but he was doing his job with the enthusiasm of someone who wanted to prove himself, to make a good impression on his new employers. The waiter greeted Jackie with the same level of courtesy he extended to every customer, offering a polite smile and asking if Jackie had been to the restaurant before. Jackie nodded, simply saying he had, enjoying the quiet moment. He had been coming here for months now, a regular, but always in a low-profile way, slipping in unnoticed, always wanting to keep a distance from the overzealous attention that usually followed his every move. But tonight was different. As the waiter began to take Jackie's order, he leaned in a little too close, glancing over Jackie's attire. Jackie, dressed casually in a jacket and jeans, didn't immediately strike the waiter as someone of any particular importance. Jackie was used to being dismissed in moments like this. His reputation wasn't always enough to shield him from the bias that people brought to the table when they saw someone like him. The waiter's eyes briefly scanned Jackie up and down before he spoke, as if sizing him up. "Can I get you something, fancy?" the waiter asked, a little too flippantly, as if trying to judge the man's worth by his appearance. Jackie, always calm, simply nodded. He was used to the assumptions people made about him. After all, he was an actor, an action star. People saw him as someone who would only order basic meals, someone whose tastes were simple and unrefined. But what the waiter didn't realize, what so many didn't realize, was that Jackie Chan was a man who had spent decades building his career, not just as a star, but as a businessman, an innovator, a creator. He had spent years crafting this restaurant, making it a place where anyone, whether famous or not, could come to enjoy a fine meal in peace. He wasn't some simple kung fu star to be overlooked. As Jackie spoke to the waiter, his calm demeanor was betrayed by the feeling that something was off. It wasn't the waiter's words, not yet. But there was an underlying current to his voice, a sense of judgment that Jackie had become all too familiar with. The waiter's tone subtly shifted when Jackie ordered an elaborate dish, one of the chef's specialties. It wasn't the most expensive item on the menu, but it was an authentic, intricate preparation, something that reflected the deep respect Jackie had for the art of cooking. The waiter, however, looked unimpressed. He hesitated, glanced back at Jackie, and muttered under his breath, not realizing how close he was to the very person he was speaking about. Typical, huh? Some stupid Chinese guy acting all fancy, like he doesn't belong in a place like this. Jackie, who had grown accustomed to such slights throughout his career, had always managed to maintain his composure. After all, he had dealt with this type of prejudice his entire life. From the early days of struggling to get acting roles in Hollywood, to being dismissed as just a martial artist, he had faced racism head-on time and time again. But it still hurt. It always did, especially when it came from someone in his own restaurant, someone he had hired to be a part of his dream. The words cut deep. Stupid Chinese guy, he thought. This wasn't just an insult to him. It was an insult to every person who looked like him, who came from where he came from, who had been told time and time again that they weren't good enough, that they didn't belong. This was the casual racism he had fought against all his life, the kind of judgment that people dismissed as harmless or just a joke, but that carried weight, a weight that had been carried by so many for generations. For a moment, Jackie's mind flashed back to the countless times he had been called names, mocked for his accent, belittled for his background. But this time, it was different. This wasn't some nameless stranger in Hollywood. This was someone who worked for him. Someone who, without even realizing it, had crossed a line. He was no longer just a customer in his own restaurant. He was someone who had to stand up, not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel small because of their race. Jackie's first instinct was to let it slide. He had built a reputation for being the bigger person, the one who would turn the other cheek. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't just about him. This wasn't just about an individual slight. This was a reflection of a larger problem, something that needed to be addressed. People had to understand that these kinds of comments weren't harmless. They had to be called out. He wasn't just a kung fu star. He wasn't just a businessman. He was Jackie Chan, a man who had spent his life fighting for respect, and now it was time to fight for that respect again. And so Jackie calmly stood up, the waiter still oblivious to who he was. Jackie's voice remained steady, but there was a weight in it that demanded attention. "Excuse me," he said. The waiter turned around, thinking nothing of it. He was going to walk away, to continue his job, but Jackie's next words froze him. "You don't know who I am, do you?" The waiter turned back in confusion, a nervous smile tugging at his lips. Sorry, what was that?" Jackie met his gaze, and in that instant, everything changed. The waiter's face shifted from confusion to realization as Jackie spoke the words that would shatter his arrogance. "I own this restaurant." The waiter stood in stunned silence. He blinked rapidly, trying to process what had just been said. Jackie Chan, the Jackie Chan, was sitting in his section, and he had just insulted him in the worst way possible. The young waiter stood frozen in disbelief, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he had just heard. Jackie Chan, the Jackie Chan, was sitting at the table he had been serving, the same man he had just insulted, unaware of the bombshell that had dropped in front of him. The realization hit like a slap in the face, and his body went rigid, his eyes widening as his face flushed with embarrassment. He hadn't just disrespected some random customer, he had insulted the very man who owned the place, the man whose name was synonymous with hard work, respect, and global recognition. Jackie Chan watched the waiter's panic unfold. There was no anger in Jackie's eyes, only a quiet, almost sorrowful understanding. He had seen this before, the shock, the regret, the guilt that followed when people realized their mistakes too late. He had been there, too many times, where assumptions were made based on his background, his race, and the way people saw him. It was a part of the battle he had fought for years. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't just a victim of prejudice. He was in the position to confront it head-on. The waiter stammered, his voice shaky. I didn't know. I didn't mean. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know it was you. I never should have said that. Jackie remained calm, his gaze steady. It's not just about me, he said softly, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. It's about respect, and how quickly we judge others based on what we think we know about them. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Jackie wasn't angry. He wasn't even disappointed, not in the way one might expect from a person who had just been insulted. Instead, he was offering a chance for growth, a moment for the waiter to realize the weight of what he had said. There was an opportunity here, an opportunity to make this uncomfortable moment into something more, something that could change not just the waiter, but everyone who would hear about it. The waiter's face twisted in shame, his shoulders slumping as the full weight of his words came crashing down on him. I've made a huge mistake. I can't believe I said that. I was just... I don't know why I said it. I've heard people talk like that before, but I didn't mean it like that. I didn't think... Jackie raised a hand, silencing him. You're not the first one to think like that. Believe me, I've heard worse. But that doesn't make it right. Just because you've heard something before doesn't mean it should be accepted. It's easy to say things like that, to stereotype, to assume. But we all have a responsibility to challenge those thoughts, to not let them just slip out of our mouths. The waiter nodded, his face a mixture of embarrassment and genuine regret. Jackie could see that the young man wasn't malicious. He wasn't a bad person. He was just ignorant, influenced by the same casual racism and prejudice that Jackie had faced throughout his life. It wasn't uncommon. Jackie had been there before. He had been the target of assumptions and slights his entire career. He had been dismissed as just a kung fu actor, or worse, as the stupid Chinese guy who couldn't possibly belong in the world of film and luxury. But he had never let that stop him. He had risen above it, again and again, and he was offering the same opportunity to the waiter now, a chance to rise above ignorance, to learn, and to grow. Look, Jackie said, his tone gentle but firm. It's not about whether you meant it or not. It's about understanding the impact of your words. The world is different now. People are paying attention. Words can either build people up or tear them down. They can make someone feel small or make them feel seen. What you said, it wasn't just about me. It was about the assumptions you made, the judgment you passed, because of what you thought you knew. The waiter swallowed hard, his eyes welling up with emotion. He had never imagined that his offhand comment, a careless remark made in passing, could have such an impact. He had never stopped to think about how much hurt those words could cause, how deeply they could cut into someone's sense of worth. And now, in this quiet, powerful moment, he was being shown that the world wasn't as simple as it seemed. Jackie Chan, the man he had so carelessly insulted, wasn't just a famous actor. He was a person who had fought, struggled, and overcome more obstacles than the waiter could ever understand. Jackie didn't want to make the young man feel worse, but he also didn't want him to leave this moment unchanged. "I could have reacted differently," Jackie continued. "I could have yelled at you, or made you feel even worse than you already do. But that's not going to help anyone. What helps is understanding, learning, and becoming better from these moments. I want you to remember this moment. I want you to walk away and think twice before you speak next time." The waiter, visibly shaken, nodded vigorously. "I'll never forget this," he said. "I promise. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I'll be more careful with my words, I swear." Jackie smiled gently. "That's all I'm asking. People make mistakes. We all do. But we have to learn from them. This is your chance to do better." As the waiter stepped back, still processing what had just happened, Jackie's words lingered in the air. Jackie wasn't just talking to the young man anymore. He was speaking to everyone who had ever been subjected to racial prejudice, to anyone who had ever been dismissed because of their background or appearance. The waiter wasn't the only one who had needed this moment of growth. The restaurant itself, the very space that Jackie had built with his own hands, needed to become a place of understanding, of learning, not just fine dining. The manager, who had been watching the exchange from the corner of the room, stepped forward cautiously. "Jackie," she began, her voice uncertain but full of respect. "I had no idea." Jackie turned to her, offering a reassuring smile. "It's not your fault. It's a lesson for all of us. We need to make sure everyone who works here understands that respect isn't optional. It's non-negotiable. I built this place not just for the food, but for the people who come here, no matter who they are. Everyone deserves to feel welcome, to feel respected." The manager nodded, understanding. She turned to the waiter who was still standing at the edge of the room, looking like a man who had just realized the weight of his actions. "You'll need to take some time. Think about what Jackie said," she said. "And I expect you to make it right. This kind of thing can't happen again. We're all part of something bigger here." The waiter, still in a daze, muttered a meek, "Yes, ma'am," and slowly walked away. Jackie watched him go, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. This wasn't about shame. It wasn't about making someone feel small. It was about growth. It was about understanding that the world was bigger than one moment, bigger than one interaction. But if people could take just a minute to reflect on their actions, to stop and think before they spoke, they could start to make the world a better place. As Jackie sat back down, he allowed himself a moment to think. He wasn't just a film star or a businessman. He was a part of a larger community, a part of a world that was still learning how to be kinder, more compassionate, more understanding. And he wasn't going to stop speaking out, stop teaching, stop using his platform for the greater good. The incident tonight was a small moment, but it had the potential to echo far beyond the walls of his restaurant. Jackie Chan had made a stand, and in doing so, had made the world just a little bit more aware of the power words had, and the responsibility that came with them. It was a message that would ripple through the world, and Jackie knew that somewhere, someone would hear it and change. And that, he believed, was worth everything. The moment Jackie Chan's words left the air, something within the restaurant seemed to shift. It wasn't just the waiter who felt the weight of the moment. It wasn't just the manager who stood frozen, grasping the deeper meaning of what had just happened. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Jackie felt something change within himself too. It wasn't just about being disrespected anymore. It wasn't even about proving something to anyone. What had started as a minor incident, a small moment of arrogance from a young man, had grown into something much larger than either of them could have anticipated. It was now a turning point, a pivotal moment for everyone involved. As Jackie sat back down, the bustling atmosphere of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background, and he took a moment to reflect on the situation. This wasn't the first time he had faced casual racism or ignorant assumptions about who he was and where he came from. His career had been built in part on defying stereotypes, breaking barriers, and forcing the world to see him not as a mere kung fu star, but as a man of substance, of character. But it wasn't enough to simply prove people wrong about him. It was about using his platform, using his life story, to shine a light on the larger issues. That was why he had built this restaurant in the first place. He wanted a space that was more than just a luxury eatery. He wanted a place where everyone, no matter their background or status, felt valued. As he glanced around the room, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. The interactions between him and the waiter, though tense, had become a lesson for everyone present, whether they realized it or not. He could see it in the faces of the other patrons, the subtle shift in their posture. They too had felt the impact of what had transpired, and it was clear that they understood the gravity of the situation, even if they didn't know how to voice it. This wasn't just a matter of one man insulting another. This was a reflection of how deep racial biases could be, how ingrained they were in the way people saw each other. For the next few minutes, the restaurant felt quieter, as if the patrons were taking the time to reflect on what they had witnessed. It wasn't an outburst, it wasn't a scandal, but it was a quiet, powerful moment that had made everyone stop and think. Jackie wasn't looking for applause or accolades. He wasn't even looking for validation. He just wanted people to understand the subtle ways in which discrimination still existed, even in places where it seemed most unlikely. He wanted to challenge the notion that such things could be brushed off as jokes, as harmless comments, and to remind everyone that their words had power. The waiter, who had been standing off to the side, still in a state of shock, eventually returned to Jackie's table, his steps slower, more deliberate. He no longer carried the cocky, dismissive air that had been present before. His face was pale, and his eyes held genuine remorse. I can't apologize enough for what I said," he began, his voice quiet but sincere. "I've never thought about how something like that could hurt someone until now. I've never thought about how I treat people, how I speak to people. I just assumed. And now, I see how wrong I was." Jackie looked at him, meeting his gaze with a calmness that was almost disarming. "Mistakes happen," Jackie said, his voice low but firm. "We all make them, but you have a choice now, whether to grow from this moment or to let it define you. The truth is, it's not just about one comment, it's about the way we think, about how quickly we judge someone based on their race, their background, or their appearance. That's the real problem, and it's up to all of us to change that." The waiter nodded, swallowing hard, as if he was trying to digest not only Jackie's words, but also the realization of what he had been part of. "I'll never make that mistake again," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I'm sorry. I promise I'll do better. I'll think before I speak, and I'll treat everyone with the respect they deserve. I'll never forget what you said." Jackie gave him a soft smile, but there was no patronizing in it, no sense of superiority. It wasn't about him winning or the waiter losing. It was about the two of them coming to an understanding that would hopefully extend beyond this single moment. "That's all anyone can ask for," Jackie said. "Just remember that the world is full of people who think they know everything about you based on what they see. And the only way to break through those barriers is by treating everyone equally, with dignity and respect." The waiter walked away with his head lowered, still processing the lesson he had just learned. He wasn't the only one, though. Behind him, the manager had been listening quietly, and now she stepped forward, addressing Jackie with a newfound sense of respect. "Jackie, I can't thank you enough for how you handled this. It's not every day that someone takes the time to teach someone else a lesson like that. You've not only helped him, but you've helped me too. I've seen things like this happen before, and I've never really known how to address it. But today, I've learned something too. Jackie nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. It's not always easy to speak up, but it's the only way things are going to change. People can't learn if we don't give them the chance to grow, and sometimes all it takes is a conversation. Over the next few days, the incident at the restaurant became the talk of the town. It wasn't because of any scandal or media frenzy. It was because Jackie's response to the situation had turned an uncomfortable moment into a powerful teaching opportunity. The story spread like wildfire on social media, and people from all over began to applaud Jackie's handling of the situation. He wasn't just a celebrity with a quick temper. He was a man who used his platform for something greater. He used his fame, not to get revenge or make an example of someone, but to remind people that we all have a responsibility to be better, to ourselves and to each other. The restaurant saw an outpouring of support as customers and patrons came forward, praising the establishment not just for its quality food, but for the values it stood for. People began to realize that Jackie's restaurant was more than just a place to eat. It was a reflection of his own journey, his own struggles, and his commitment to creating a space where respect was the foundation of everything. The employees, too, began to feel a shift. They understood the gravity of what had happened, and many of them started to reflect on their own behavior, questioning the subtle biases they had carried without ever realizing it. Meanwhile, the waiter, having taken Jackie's words to heart, began to share his experience with others. He spoke to friends, family, and even co-workers, telling them about the lesson he had learned. It wasn't just a matter of apologizing for one mistake. It was a moment of awakening, a chance to reevaluate everything he had been taught about people, about race, about who deserved respect and who didn't. And he wasn't the only one learning. Jackie's actions had set off a ripple effect, sparking conversations about racism, prejudice, and the importance of empathy and understanding. For Jackie, though, the impact of that single moment was about more than just the waiter's apology or the praise that came afterward. It was about the deeper change that he had sparked in the hearts of others. He knew that this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was just the beginning. Change wasn't going to come overnight, but it was coming. And as long as people were talking, as long as they were reflecting on their actions, there was hope. It wasn't just a win for Jackie Chan. It was a win for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly, dismissed or underestimated because of who they were. It was a win for every person who had fought for dignity, for respect, and for the chance to be seen as equal. And Jackie knew that, no matter how small the victory, it was a step forward. A step toward a world that treated everyone with the respect they deserved. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of what had happened in the restaurant continued to ripple through the community. Jackie Chan's calm yet powerful handling of the situation had not only changed the young waiter, but had also set off a broader conversation about racism, respect, and empathy that had reached far beyond the walls of his restaurant. The moment was being discussed everywhere, on social media, in offices, at family dinners. People who had been oblivious to their own prejudices or had turned a blind eye to the microaggressions in everyday life began to reflect. Jackie's words had touched something deep within them, a call to action that couldn't be ignored. The conversation wasn't just about one man's mistake. It was about a cultural shift, a collective moment where people realized that respect wasn't just about politeness. It was about understanding, about actively challenging the biases we've been taught, about questioning the stereotypes we've internalized. Jackie's actions had made it clear that silence in the face of discrimination was no longer an option. It was a time to speak up, to confront ignorance with kindness, and to change the way people thought about each other. As the weeks passed, Jackie's restaurant became not just a place for good food, but a symbol of the values he had always held dear. Values of respect, hard work, and integrity. The waiter, who had once made a hurtful, thoughtless remark, began to speak openly about his experience. He shared his story with others, telling them how his eyes had been opened, how Jackie's words had challenged him to rethink the way he saw people, and how he was now committed to treating every single person he met with dignity and respect. The waiter's transformation was evident to those who interacted with him. He was no longer the same person who had made the careless comment. He was now someone who actively sought to create a more inclusive environment, someone who wanted to educate others on the importance of understanding and compassion. Jackie, however, didn't want the focus to be on him. Yes, his words had made an impact, but the true victory was in the lasting change that had been sparked in the hearts of others. As the story of the restaurant incident continued to spread, Jackie found himself in conversations with people from all walks of life. Business leaders, educators, activists, and ordinary people who had seen the video or read about what had transpired. They all echoed the same sentiment. Jackie's actions had shown them a better way to handle difficult moments, a way to approach problems with humility, patience, and a willingness to teach rather than punish. This wasn't just about a celebrity handling a small issue. It was about the power of kindness and how sometimes the most profound lessons come not from a place of anger, but from a place of understanding. Jackie had shown the world that you didn't have to raise your voice in order to make a change. Sometimes the quietest words carry the most weight. And by choosing not to react in anger, but to offer a chance for growth and redemption, Jackie had given the young waiter and the rest of the world a moment to reflect and learn. But even as the world took notice, Jackie's own perspective on the situation remained grounded in his core belief. Actions speak louder than words. He didn't seek praise, he didn't need validation. What mattered to him most was that people walked away from this experience better, more aware of the responsibility they had to one another. What mattered was that the waiter, the manager, the staff, the customers, all of them, understood the power of respect and empathy. Jackie knew that change wasn't going to happen overnight, and it wasn't going to come from a single conversation or event. But what he had witnessed in that restaurant, the shift in awareness and attitude, gave him hope. Hope that if people could learn to see each other for who they truly were, not who they thought they were, the world could be a much kinder place. As Jackie moved forward with his work, his life, and his mission, he knew that there would always be challenges ahead. There would always be moments where people would judge others unfairly, where assumptions would be made, and where discrimination would rear its ugly head. But now Jackie felt more empowered than ever. He knew that the fight for respect wasn't over, but it was one worth fighting. And he knew that every time he spoke up, every time he used his voice to address issues of prejudice or injustice, it was one small step toward making the world a better place. The ripples of this moment didn't just stop in the restaurant. They spread across the globe, sparking discussions about the importance of inclusivity, about the need for respect, and about the power of taking a moment to think before speaking. People who had once dismissed small instances of racism as just a joke or harmless began to take those issues seriously, understanding that those small moments added up, that they mattered. Jackie's lesson had touched hearts everywhere. It wasn't just about one insult. It was about the larger battle, the fight to create a world where people were truly seen and valued, regardless of their background, their ethnicity, or the color of their skin. And so, as the weeks turned into months, Jackie's legacy only grew stronger. He wasn't just the martial arts legend who brought action-packed movies to life. He was a man who had dedicated his career to something greater. Jackie's work in the film industry had always been about breaking boundaries. But now, his work as a human being, his fight for equality, for respect, for justice, was equally as important. Jackie's journey had never been easy. He had faced countless challenges, not only in his career but in his personal life. He had battled racism, ageism, and discrimination, but he had never allowed it to define him. Instead, he used those experiences to fuel his drive, to prove that he was more than just a stereotype. He had worked hard to show the world that everyone, no matter where they came from, could achieve greatness. And with each lesson he shared, with each person he helped understand the importance of kindness and respect, he continued to prove that the true measure of a person wasn't in the size of their bank account or the number of awards they had won. It was in the depth of their heart and the impact they had on others. And now, Jackie's message was reaching more people than ever before. His words were ringing out loud and clear, calling on all of us to reflect on our own actions, our own assumptions, and our own biases. He had made it clear that change didn't need to come from some grand gesture. It could come from the small moments, from the quiet conversations that happened behind closed doors, from the willingness to look inward and confront the ways we've been taught to view others. Jackie had taught us that change starts with a single act of courage, a single act of kindness. Now, I want to hear from you. How has this story made you reflect on your own actions, your own assumptions? Have you ever experienced a moment where you were judged unfairly, or where you judged someone else? What did you learn from it? Leave a comment below and let's continue this conversation. Jackie's story is far from over, and neither is the fight for a more respectful world. It starts with us. So what will you do to make a difference?